Thanks to the favourite, Queen Anne is now remembered as the sickly woman with pet rabbits and a suspiciously intense friendship with her ladies-in-waiting. But who was she really? In this video, we're going to separate the Hollywood fantasy from historical reality and take a closer look at the true nature of one of Britain's most overlooked queens and her most intimate relationships. Welcome back to Female Tales. I'm Yulia, and together on this channel, we explore the stories of remarkable women from history. If history speaks to you, like the video, join our community, and let's head straight into the depths of the past. When a historical film gets 10 Oscar nominations, you know we can't just ignore it. Especially not on this channel. And especially not when it features someone as rarely portrayed, and unfortunately, largely forgotten, as Queen Anne Stuart, played by the brilliant Olivia Colman. Now, The Favourite presents itself not as a strict historical drama, but as a satirical, absurdist art film, and just like many shows we've discussed here before, it doesn't claim to be historically accurate. But still, we're going to use it as a perfect opportunity to shine a bit more light on the life of the last monarch of the Stuart dynasty. The film opens with a scene where Queen Anne asks her closest friend, Sarah Churchill, to pet her rabbits, who live in little cages right there in her bedroom.
Sarah, you must say hello to the little ones.
No, it is macabre.
Please.
No, I love you, but that I will not do.
If you love me,
Love has limits.
it should not.
These rabbits end up becoming a central symbol in the film. It begins with them and it ends with them. But of course, Queen Anne didn't actually keep rabbits in her bedroom. In the early 18th century, when the story takes place, rabbits were not considered pets. They were seen as pests or simply food. The film uses the 17 rabbits as a metaphor for Anne's 17 lost children. Although, in reality, it was 18, since one of her pregnancies was with twins. This is probably one of the most tragic chapters of Anne's life. A woman who desperately wanted to be a mother, and from whom the entire country expected an heir. Only 5 of her children were born alive, and none of them survived childhood. One baby was even carried dead in her womb for nearly a month before being delivered. It's honestly a miracle Anne herself didn't die of infection. The only child who lived past infancy was Prince William, Duke of Gloucester, but even he died at just 11 years old. Losing even one child is an enormous tragedy for any woman. Anne's heart was broken 18 times. Let's take a closer look at how the film portrays Queen Anne herself. First of all, I want to say I really liked Olivia Colman's performance. She looked the part, and her acting was incredible. But I don't fully agree with how Anne is shown to us as a person. In the movie, Anne comes across as extremely ill, almost unable to walk on her own, emotionally fragile, barely interested in politics, and completely reliant on her favourite, Sarah Churchill, who seems to be ruling in her place. And to be fair, when it comes to Anne's physical health, the film isn't wrong. She really was seriously unwell.
I have many such. One just walks around with them, and sometimes one can feel them filling with blood.
To begin with, just try to imagine what 17 pregnancies would do to your body. Anne was severely overweight, she suffered from gout, and yes, she really was often carried around the palace in a sedan chair or used a wheelchair. Since childhood, she'd had problems with her eyesight, constant tearing, and modern historians now suspect she may have suffered from things like lupus or even diabetes, based on her symptoms. But of course, those diagnoses weren't known at the time. What's even sadder is how little compassion people had for her suffering. A contemporary writer, Roger Coke, called her monstrously fat, with a face that had a tincture of sourness and was rubicund and bloated, blaming it all on her supposed addiction to overeating and hot chocolate. Another politician, John Clarke, after seeing her during a particularly painful gout attack, wrote, "Nature seems to be inverted when a poor, infirm woman becomes one of the rulers of the world." When Anne died at the age of 49, her coffin was reportedly so large that it took 14 people to carry it, and all people could talk about was her size. Personally, I think it's deeply unfair that her body has become the main thing she's remembered for, more than her pain, her personality, or her politics. If I had to choose one word to describe her, it wouldn't be fat. It would be tormented. What about you? What word would you use? But what the film absolutely gets wrong is how it portrays Anne as this childish, clueless monarch who doesn't even know whether her country is at war and just blindly obeys Sarah Churchill like a puppet. That's not who Queen Anne was.
We won! Oh, it is not over. We must continue.
Oh, I did not know that.
Was she the most brilliant ruler in British history? No. But she was far from disengaged. In fact, she was incredibly hardworking and deeply involved in running the country. What she lacked in charisma, she made up for in consistency and stability, and that's no small thing. Anne supported the Acts of Union in 1707, which united the crowns of England and Scotland into a single kingdom, a huge political achievement. She attended more cabinet meetings than any monarch before or after her, and she held strong opinions on many political matters. The real issue? She constantly had to balance the growing tension between two rival political factions, the Tories and the Whigs. And at the same time, she was a woman ruling in a deeply sexist world, surrounded by men who didn't take her seriously simply because of her gender. All of that combined, the political struggles, the personal losses, the dismissiveness of her male peers, meant Anne never really got the recognition she deserved. Even though, let's not forget, she was one of the very few queens regnant in English history, a woman ruling in her own right. But one thing the film gets absolutely right is the influence Sarah Churchill had over Queen Anne. Smart, powerful, and incredibly assertive, Sarah wasn't just close to the Queen, she shaped nearly every part of Anne's daily life and rule. Now, as for whether their relationship was romantic, we'll save that juicy part for the very end. But before we get there, we need to talk more about Sarah herself. Because she wasn't just a major figure in Anne's life, she's also the ancestor of two of Britain's most iconic names, Winston Churchill and Princess Diana. Anne and Sarah had known each other since childhood. Anne was 5 years younger, and when Sarah came to court at age 13 to serve Anne's stepmother, the girls bonded almost instantly. From the very start, Anne fell under Sarah's spell. The two were complete opposites. Sarah was charismatic, commanding, and bold. Anne, more shy, reserved, and introverted. And this dynamic followed them well into adulthood. Anne's sister, Mary, hated their friendship, and even tried to cut it off by giving Anne an ultimatum. Either Sarah goes, or you do. Anne chose Sarah. Things got so dramatic that Mary took away Anne's royal guard and ordered the entire court to stop speaking to her. The friendship between Anne and Sarah ran deep. So deep, in fact, that they gave each other private nicknames and continued using them for years. Sarah was Mrs. Freeman, and Anne was Mrs. Morley.
Mrs. Morley. Please!
When Anne finally became queen in 1702, Sarah was instantly given the highest position a woman could hold at court, Keeper of the Robes. But that wasn't all. She was also appointed Mistress of the Privy Purse, basically in charge of Anne's personal finances, and Ranger of Windsor Great Park. In other words, Sarah was in charge of everything, from Anne's money and daily schedule to what jewels or dresses she'd wear to official events. And yes, as the film shows, Sarah could be incredibly blunt. At times, she even told the Queen to be quiet in public.
Do you really think you can meet the Russian delegation looking like that?
No.
I will manage it. Go back to your rooms.
Thank you.
Some of that dynamic probably came from the fact that, according to one of her biographers, Anne's education was surprisingly inadequate. She clearly struggled with spontaneous conversation. People even said that when she felt out of her depth, she would just move her lips and pretend to keep talking. And as they got older, the differences between them weren't just about personality anymore. They became political. Anne was a devoted Tory, the so-called Church Party, and religion was a huge part of her identity and decision-making. Sarah, on the other hand, aligned herself with the Whigs, the party that pushed for war and supported her husband, the Duke of Marlborough, and his military campaigns. By the time the film The Favourite shows us their dramatic rivalry, Sarah wasn't even around that much anymore. After Anne gifted her the grand Blenheim Palace estate at Woodstock, Sarah spent most of her time there. The two women mostly communicated through letters, something that infuriated Anne. Into this emotional vacuum stepped Abigail Hill, the Queen's new favourite and the woman at the centre of all the court drama. Now, the film tells us that Abigail, who would later become Abigail Masham after marriage, first appeared at court as a desperate, bedraggled cousin, begging Sarah for a job. She starts at the very bottom, basically washing chamber pots, and then works her way up by playing on Sarah's pity. And yes, this part is mostly true. Abigail really did come from a struggling family, and she really was Sarah's cousin. But the movie skips one detail. She'd actually already been working under Sarah's protection years before she ever came to Kensington Palace. Sarah herself helped get her appointed as one of Anne's maids of honour in 1704. Unlike Sarah, Abigail was quiet, polite, gentle and unassuming. And that may have been exactly what Queen Anne needed. Someone who didn't challenge her, talk over her or make her feel small. The film doesn't make it very clear how quickly everything unfolds. It feels like one favourite replaces the other in just a few weeks. But in reality, the friendship between Abigail and the Queen developed slowly, over the course of several years, before they began spending time together daily. The Queen even paid for Abigail's wedding. As for her relationship with Sarah, it officially ended in 1710. So, basically, what we're shown on screen compresses around 6 years of events. Though, personally, I didn't really get that sense while watching. In the movie, it looks like Abigail schemes her way into the Queen's favour, poisons Sarah, who ends up in a brothel, and then destroys her letters to the Queen to make sure they never reconcile. In reality, things were far less dramatic, and the fallout between the two women, as I mentioned, stretched out over years. And honestly, a lot of it was Sarah's own fault. At one point, she even funded the writing and distribution of a satirical poem that hinted at an unusual relationship between the Queen and Abigail. When, as Queen Anne of great renown, Great Britain's sceptre swayed, beside the church she dearly loved, a dirty chambermaid. Oh, Abigail, that was her name. She starched and stitched full well, but how she pierced this royal heart, no mortal man can tell. She even blackmailed the Queen with her old letters. The very same letters Sarah had once told Anne to burn, which Anne obediently did. By early 1711, the Queen had had enough. She stripped Sarah of her positions and kicked her out of court, despite Sarah's last desperate attempts to apologise. At the time of her dismissal, Sarah mysteriously received £18,000 from the Queen's personal treasury, most likely hush money. But staying silent? Not really Sarah's thing. She went on to publish several memoirs after Anne's death, painting her in quite an unflattering light. Honestly, what kind of nightmare bestie behaviour is that? Funny enough, the film completely leaves out another very important person in Anne's life, her husband, Prince George of Denmark. And during the events shown on screen, he was very much alive. He had been her beloved partner for over 25 years until his death in 1708. His death, by the way, was another reason for the falling out between Anne and Sarah. Sarah, in true I know best fashion, forced Anne to remove George's portraits, made her move out of the residence they had shared, and even refused to wear mourning clothes for him. Maybe she thought that kind of tough love would help shake Anne out of her grief, but in reality, it just drove an even bigger wedge between them. And since we've already brought up her husband, it's probably time to return to that topic, Anne's supposed lesbianism. I mean, it's kind of hard to reconcile 25 years of what appears to have been a happy marriage with the idea of Anne being in love with women. So, let's talk about how exactly Queen Anne ended up being labelled an LGBT icon, and whether she really deserves that status. When I think about Anne's personality, I honestly see someone who was deeply dependent on the people around her, maybe even prone to codependent relationships. Though, to be fair, that might just be a royal problem in general. When you're the monarch, your circle of trust is very, very limited. The argument for Anne being a lesbian is mostly based on her letters to Sarah Churchill, which, yes, do sound very intense to modern ears. Oh, come to me tomorrow as soon as you can, that I may cleave myself to you. 'Tis impossible for you ever to believe how much I love you except you. But some historians argue this kind of language was actually very common in women's correspondence at the time. For example, Sarah herself wrote to another friend, "I long to embrace you, and I love you beyond expression." And Frances Apsley once told Anne directly, "I feel more of love than any woman can for woman, and more love than ever the constantest lover had for his mistress." So, either everyone at court was secretly a lesbian, or this was just how women expressed affection back then. There's also the idea that maybe Anne had what we'd now call latent or unrecognised same-sex attraction, feelings that might have been romantic but never really processed or acted upon. But here's another thing. Anne was very religious, like deeply conservative. She even asked for her image on coins to be shown with her shoulders completely covered. That's the kind of woman we're talking about here. So, honestly, it's kind of hard to picture her having the kind of steamy bedroom scenes with women we saw in The Favourite. Not when she was either constantly pregnant or suffering terribly from the long-term effects of all those pregnancies and illnesses. Personally, I just don't see it. As I said earlier, the word that comes to mind when I think of Anne is tormented, not passionate. But what do you think? How would you describe Queen Anne's sexuality? So, to wrap things up, The Favourite is definitely an impressive piece of filmmaking. The direction, the visuals, the intentionally offbeat, modern meets historical costumes, and of course the incredible acting, it all deserves your attention. But when it comes to the real history of Queen Anne and her two favourites, well, let's just say the connection is pretty loose. Still, I was genuinely happy to see anything about Queen Anne on screen. A woman with a difficult, often heartbreaking life, and someone who's been strangely forgotten by history. And who is Queen Anne to you? If you had to describe her in just one word, what would it be? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.